Welcome, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good. Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for joining the session. I'm sure you're here to learn more about PowerApps and Flow management, right? Hopefully. Show of hands, who are my admins in the room? Admins. Okay. Devs? Awesome. Okay, so let's kind of dive in here. PowerApps, Flow, great solutions for our citizen developers, right? How many of you are actively using the solutions within your organization, helping your business? Okay, you may have questions, right? How do we manage this? How do we deploy this? How do we govern it? That's really what we're going to be talking about today, right? So let's kind of dive in. So what are some of those questions that you have? Hey, our organization, we have compliance rules. We have to protect our data. There's certain controls we have to have in place. How can we do that in this new citizens development world of PowerApps and Flow? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, some best practices around that, right? So hopefully when you guys and gals, sorry, my Texas accent coming out there, leave here, you're equipped with some of those best practice guidance tools, okay? All right. Again, many more questions you may have. We'll try to leave some time here at the end for more questions specific to, again, your customers or your environment there. All right. The Power Platform. Pretty cool, right? Power Platform, again, designed to help us understand our data, work with our data for our businesses. Gives us the ability to tap into that and then be more agile for our end users, right? Remember the days when we had to, again, go to development teams, very resource intensive. How long did it take to really provide that value back to the business, right? So in today's modern world now, the Power Platform, again, makes it very easy for us to do that, leveraging the solutions of PowerApps and Flow, right? So from the admin or governance side of the house, right, we can take that Power Platform and help us in our role of the administrator, or maybe I'm the development lead that leads the charge for PowerApps and Flow within my organization, right? I'm still responsible for, again, how do we govern and how do we manage this for our organization? So we'll be looking at some best practices on how the admin role can leverage that same Power Platform capability. All right? Fair enough. Typical presentation, right? The factor power of 3, right? So let's break it down, talk about securing your environments for your development of PowerApps and Flow, right? We'll talk about that and some of the best practices there. Talk about how do we monitor, how do we get information that's pertinent to what people are doing with their development of apps and flows within our organization. And then talk about getting alerts, being alerted, being proactive when certain particular activities are happening that may require us to do some type of action to protect us within the organization, okay? So from these 3 main topics, the goal here is to provide you with, again, kind of the 10 best practices for administering the flows and apps within your organization. All right, so let's dive in. Security, right? First and foremost, right? There's so much happening in today's world with security, right? We have to have security mindset with everything we do, right? So one thing, of course, to make note of is that for those unfamiliar with, PowerApps and PowerFlow does not grant permissions to the data source. It just empowers those permissions and access that already exist, right? So remember that, right? So that's one layer of protection, right? Most customers have a pretty good ACL or access method because they've been stewards of the data for quite a long time. Again, the Power App development, again, if you don't already have access to the data, again, there's a level of protection there, right? Network access. Where is the data within your network, right? How do you access it? Through any type of firewalls or proxies or database access, right? That can still be controlled from that network layer there, right? And so we want to, number one, take a look at, again, how are we accessing the content? What are the security practices that we're currently leveraging? And again, that's a broad conversation because we're talking about security within your organization, right? So again, it will involve multiple personas and roles within your organization. Number two, consider conditional access within your Azure Active Directory services, right? If you need to kind of control, hey, I want to restrict the use access to PowerApps and Flows if someone is, traveling or in a certain area that we don't really allow that type of access. If I want to control maybe from a device level, we'll talk about the new updates for mobile application management there. But you can take advantage of conditional access to help you with another layer of protection in terms of how you govern those particular applications there, okay? Does require Azure Active Directory Premium to be able to access that. But from there, you can make those controls and settings, right? Some general guidance whenever we're talking about policy implementation and things of that nature. Kind of the slow crawl, walk, run methodology, right? Make sure you have a subset of users that you're testing with first, and then deploy to the larger audience organization, right? Also, kind of best practice there is be careful with the block all policies in general, because again, you could potentially lock yourself out if you're an administrator and things of that nature. So again, general guidance whenever we're talking about applying policies within your organization. Okay, so level of control there to help us from an admin perspective. Okay, recently announced a couple months ago, we now have this ability from the Intune side to help us control some of the access from our devices as it relates to PowerApps and Flows. So we can actually create policies for those applications on those devices as well. Okay. All right. Number three, know your environments. Okay? Environments are essentially containers in which these apps and flows live within your organization, right? Within your tenant. And so you can actually use the environment as a level of control and management. For example, maybe you have a global presence and you have users consuming your applications across the globe. However, the data that they're using and accessing has data sovereignty requirements, right? Maybe you want to set up an environment that will restrict the data from leaving that particular region or territory, right? Traditional, you could have environments for application lifecycle development, right? Hey, we'll build our initial versions of the application in a particular environment that's controlled, restricted, and then we will promote that maybe to a production environment is another example, right? So you can leverage these environments to help you, again, control access of who can access the data, where that data particularly may reside as well as it pertains to the applications, all right? So let's talk a little bit deeper about the environment, okay? So we have, out of the box, we have the environmental roles, right? The first level is the environmental admin, and then we have the environmental maker roles, right? That come with the tenant. And so the maker role is pretty self-explanatory, right? By design, Microsoft says everyone should be able to make apps and flows, right? That's the whole point of citizen development, right? And so you have the maker role that, again, you can By default, everyone's a maker. But again, you can restrict that depending upon your needs there. And then we have the environmental admin that, again, is part of the administration for your tenant that can manage the different environments there. Okay? The development from the end user side that's creating the apps, they also can govern who has access to the apps, who the apps are shared with. So again, that's another layer of control as well, right? To help kind of govern the access there. And then again, if we're using CDS, the Common Data Service, we also have granular roles to give us more complex permission governance guidance when we're talking about the CDS databases that are being created for your environments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay? All right. So those are the key roles that we have. Now, one important point here is that when you're creating your environments, by default, it doesn't automatically create a common service, common database service, which is essentially a data store that's going out and collected data entities from your Office 365 and Dynamics 365 data points there. So once that database gets created, your role automatically changes from environment admin to system admin by default. Okay. So again, this gives you more granularity, flexibility in terms of who can access the data that's coming from Dynamics there. Okay. So a couple important points about the environments here. If I go back one slide. Every tenant gets a default environment. That's a requirement. Can't delete it, can't change it. If you are working in a hybrid world and you want to maybe connect to data on premises, then that would require a gateway. And the only way to configure the gateway is to use the default environment. Okay? So that's very important if you're in a hybrid scenario there. Okay? All right. So if I'm an admin and I'm administering all of my environments, I typically would be a global admin, and I would also need a Plan 2 PowerApps plan license to give me the full capability to administer all of my environments with apps and flows going forward. So global administration and the PowerApps P2 plan add-on to give me the administration capabilities I need. Okay? All right. Number 4, how do we prevent data from sipping out, leaking through the apps that we're creating? Okay, we have what we call DLP, data loss prevention, that's built in for the administrators to help put in rules in place in terms of what connectors are allowed to connect with certain data points, data entries, right? So you can create a DLP policy that says, yeah, it's great for you to connect an app with SharePoint in our environment, but we won't allow you to create that connection to Twitter, for example, right? Potential data leakage as an example of that, right? And so we'll kind of walk through this here. So let's jump into our first demo, and let's create a DLP policy here. All right. So let me hop over here. All right. So we have several portals available to us for the Power Platform. We'll talk a little bit more on what's in preview now and how we're consolidating those. So the first is I'm going into the admin.powerapps.com portal. And so the first option here is for me to see all of my environments within the tenant. I'm currently logged in as the administrator for the tenant. And again, so I have the global administration role and I have that Plan 2 license as well. okay? So I can create different policies here for my organization, and I can manage the ones that are currently existing here. So you can see there's my default environment that was created for the tenant. And then I have a couple of other ones here as well. Because I'm running a trial Office 365 tenant, I can't do production, but again, the concept is still consistent here. So I can see several environments here, and we'll talk about what the difference is here. But to create my DLP policy, I would either go to the PowerApps Admin Center here, or if I wanted to, I could actually go to the Flow Admin Center as well. And so the roadmap is to consolidate all of these admin portals into one to reduce confusion of users having to go to separate admin portals, making it very, very confusing. Okay, I went to this one first, now I'm at this one. What do I do here, right? So that's going to be the roadmap, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But if I wanted to create a new DLP policy, again, I have to be, that system administrator, or I can be an environment admin as well, and I can create those policies there. So create new policy, pretty straightforward here. So under environments, again, sit down, kind of talk through this, definitely communicate it to the community within your organization, your developers that are creating the Power Apps and Flows, and any other stakeholders that will be impacted by this, because we don't want to be creating policies that impact their experience, right, that they are unaware of, right? We definitely want to communicate what those policies are, right? So I could apply a policy to all of my environments, or I could select a specific environment to apply the policy to. It's totally up to the rules that we're building here, okay? Or I can do an exception and do kind of the reverse logic here and say, hey, apply a policy to every environment except a particular environment. Those are my options, okay? So I'll go here and click through this. So now, really to kind of understand this, we're basically saying, hey, by default, these are all the connectors that we don't allow access to our business data, right? And so as I'm building a DLP policy here, I might say, hey, anyone using a common data service connector, right? You can use that with any of these other connectors that I put in this same business data only category, right? But if I try to use a app or flow that leverages this CDS service, and then I say, hey, I want to use the Ally app, the policy will restrict that, right? And that's, again, the whole purpose of that, to restrict what these connectors can get from a business data perspective. So I'll show you what mine is doing here for my testing. So I have a couple DLPs here. Let's kind of blow that back up. And let me go over to my flows. Let's see here. Yep. So I have a couple of flows I've created within my demo environment. Let's pull this up. Some of these are running, some of these are scheduled. Notice this one here, it's kind of in this weird state, right? It's the icon isn't quite active, and it has this block symbol here. The reason why is because this particular flow is trying to take data from my internal environment and trying to make an app connected to LinkedIn, which is not allowed from a DLP policy. Okay? So again, that's how we're able to control that. So you as the admin and the PowerApps admins can restrict that with DLP policies. Okay? So this will remain in that state until I either change the policy or redesign my flow here. All right. Again, most important point there, communicate the DLP policies, make sure that everyone is totally aware of what those are. All right. So, security, quick recap, okay? Have those conversations. What do we have to protect? Understand what those are as it relates to your flows and apps within your environment. And then again, take a look at conditional access if that's needed to help you, again, restrict devices, locations, things of that nature. And then also implement your DLP policies. Another guidance I would kind of recommend on the DLP is if you're doing your project and you're just getting started, that first 30 days, go ahead and start to think about your DLP policies. Because what you don't want to happen is that the flows and apps are out there running and you don't have any policies that are really aware. So you definitely want to start to get those in as early as possible, right? That first kind of timeline where you're deploying this out. So think about that as well. And we'll give you some more guidance around, again, maybe kind of like a first 30 days, what you should be doing, maybe after 6 months, and then maybe after another 6 months, some of the best practices there. All right, let's talk about monitoring now. So the good news is we can actually leverage a lot of the activity logging that's coming into the service through the Office 365 Security and Admin Center. All of the logs now capture events for PowerApps and Flow. So that's available to us as well to see who created particular apps, who edited them, so on and so forth. That information gets logged and tracked, and so we can see that. For an admin, that's important to us, right? We want to remember global, large organizations, a lot of apps and flows being created. And so I want to have some quick reporting that I can keep track of that type of activity within my organization, right? So these are the supported events currently that are being logged through that activity API, through that security and compliance audit log search that you as the PowerApps and Flow admin can report on, okay? Number 6, another admin best practice, especially again, large organization, a lot of development. I need to know who has licenses, where they're coming from, when are they coming into the tenant, so I can keep track of that, again, from an admin perspective. And so inside the portals today, you can actually download a report that says, all of the users within my organization, this is how they were able to access Flow or PowerApps. Now, PowerApps and Flows, they are a cloud service, which means we can benefit from the user access, user identity, authentication in Azure Active Directory, and the licensing check that happens every time someone accesses PowerApps and Flows, right? So that gives us a lot of capability to do some of the things I just mentioned, and specifically around audit logging and things of that nature, right? The benefits, again, native with the cloud. So I can see here, I have some users are trialing PowerApps and Flows by design, right? Want to make it very easy to sign up and start building PowerApps and Flows, right? So I can report on that. And then I can see maybe my other enterprise users that maybe got a licensed version from our e-plan or whatever the case may be there. So you have this available to you to report on. All right, number 7. Analytics. Great analytics now built into the portals to give us even more information, visibility into what's happening from a performance perspective, what flows, apps are running long, API calls, who is sharing apps within the organization. So we can see a lot of that information through the admin analytics. So let's take a look at what that will look like here. Let me switch back over. All right. So if we go to now, here's where, again, the preview, the roadmap is. The plan is to move all of those other portals into this, the Power Platform Admin Center. Okay, so you can, again, log into a central portal to do all of your management, right? So at the very top here, we have our analytics. So we can start to come down. I can see my common data service apps that I'm building using, CDS or other advanced first-party apps from Dynamics and things of that nature. And then I can actually click on Flow, and I can see analytics for my flows that are currently in my environment. So I can switch from the different environments that we have. Currently, I'm on my default environment, and you can see several runs over this week where I've been testing a couple flows within my organization here, using Power BI underneath to present all of this in the dashboard here. So daily runs, my weekly runs, and any monthly runs I have, okay? By default, it will collect up to 28 days of logging there. If I want to change my environments, I can change the filter here and then switch to the other environments that I'm managing within my organization and get reporting on that, okay? So real quick, if I walk through a couple of the other locations here, what's my usage for this particular one? My flow usage here, I can see a couple of my flows are being created or run through system events. Some are through button clicks here, and some are scheduled flows. I can see all of that from the reporting here. And I can go down and drill down even further and see, any trends for apps that are ticking up or trending down. That's also a pretty good metric there as well to see how the adoption or use of that business flow is running. Okay. All right, so we go into PowerApps now. Again, similar information around that. Specifically, again, the usage, launches across devices, browsers. We get all that information there. I can do slicing and filtering based upon a couple selections here. I can also, I like this one, I can click on location and get a report back that says these are where the applications are being launched from, the IP addresses, regional locations and things of that nature. So you can see here I did a lot of my testing in the US, and then I did some here in the EU, and you see the dots that represent where those flows are being launched there. Okay? Toast errors. So yeah, you have your apps being deployed. Sometimes users are getting errors or permissions. Again, maybe they don't have access to the back-end data, right? So they'll get that toast message on top of their application. And so we can see that logging and reporting as well in the report here. So you can see I had a couple of errors for my couple of apps I have where I was testing, again, some of the permissions there, and that's being reported also. All right. Again, kind of quick run through the, again, new, all the development will be here going forward to consolidate the admin experience there. But again, some of this is, again, still in preview here. For example, if I clicked on data policies, it's going to take me back to the PowerApps admin portal to go back and create the policies because, again, it's still in preview there, right? All right. Okay. And again, just remember data gateways, we have to connect those to our default environment on those for anything on premises. All right. Okay. So, looking at monitoring, you have a lot of capability today from the admin view to get a lot of the reports using the Security Center audit reports. Take advantage of those. Again, supported for PowerApps and Flows. Download the report to understand who has access, what license they have. Another thing about that, keep in mind that users, even though they don't have maybe an assigned license, they can actually go out and sign up for a community plan, which is free, that will give them their own kind of siloed environment to do, again, the PowerApps development, right? Again, the design is to empower the end users to provide those solutions for their business. Now, they can't share those within the environment, but again, they can get in there and start building those, and you will see that community license show up in that user report, right? You'll see that show up. And then you can help them with, again, planning out how to do the application lifecycle management to kind of bring it into production when it's appropriate there. So important point about the developer and community license as well. Same with the environment. So if I'm creating my own kind of sandbox environment through some trial plans, the admin will see those show up as developer environments in the environments portal there. Okay? All right. Alert and action. Let's take a look here. So we kind of talked about the admin portals that we have already a bit here. Really just depends where you want to start your management today, if you want to leverage those. Some customers will say this isn't quite enough. We need a little bit more granularity, a little bit more flexibility in terms of what reports can I read, how can I get more information, things of that nature. So you can actually, again, leveraging the Power Platform, you can actually start to build and connect a lot of different ways to get more of that administration information that you need by, again, leveraging connectors. There are some specific to administrators that are being built from the community. You can also, again, build your own by leveraging those. And there's a couple of options here to use either webhooks or polling approach. But again, the concept here is I need a little bit more insight into what's happening with my PowerApps and Flows within my organization that maybe I don't have outside the out-of-the-box admin portals here, okay? So let's kind of walk through what that would look like. For example, if I wanted to trigger workflows from audit logs. All right. Okay, so if I go to my flows here, I have several flows here, my test tenant, and there's a couple. I'll use the template route here first. So I go to create a flow using the templates, and if I start to type in admin, there's a couple that will return. Yep. So admin, get the list of new flows, right? So whenever a new flow gets created, remember that audit logging we were capturing, I can actually pull from that audit logging and actually create a nice flow to do a lot of things, right? I could be notified on it. I could do another trigger or event based upon that. Again, sky's the limit there, but again, this is just an example of how I could set that up. So if I click on this, again, this was placed in the template here, and so talks about, the flow will connect to, Outlook to get into the service. Talked about, obviously the permissions of authentication and authorizing there, right? And so build this out. I've already done that here. And so what I could do is I could schedule this to run on a regular basis, right? Here it is, get all the list of newly created flows if I wanted to, right? And so if I run this will fire up. Doesn't need any additional input, this particular one. And then what should happen is this will actually go out, look at the audit logs, and see if there's been any new created flows or apps, whatever I'm looking for, within that time period that I've configured here, right? So you can see here, this one came back and said, hey, there's no new flows today. But here's a report that actually shows me all the flows that were created for a particular time window that I was searching for. Again, the concept here, the foundation, I can build on top of this to do all kinds of things. And a lot of this is driven through a lot of large organizations have central logging. Our SIEM systems, maybe you're leveraging ArcSight or whatever the case may be, you can funnel those alerts and do a lot of triggers and things of that nature from that activity, right? And centrally manage that versus sending that to different emails and stuff like that. Okay? All right. All right. PowerShell. Big fan of PowerShell from my administration days, right? Again, where there's limits in the UI admin, especially when we're talking about bulk operations, I want to do something across a larger target, a lot of users, multiple environments. I'm probably going to be looking at PowerShell to do that heavy lifting, right? I'm going to create scripts to do a lot of that. So we do have some commandless functions that are available in the modules. We have about 37 or so for the environment developers. If you don't have the admin role, you do have some capability to manage your own environments, your apps in your environments. And we also have about 67 or so commandlets for the admin, again, to have a little bit more capability around running some PowerShell, things of that nature within your environment. A lot of your CRUD type of activity where you can read different environments, read apps and things of that nature, and you can do a lot of cool things with PowerShell there. All right. So let's talk a little bit about number 10. Build the policies you need with PowerApps and Flows in PowerShell. Yeah, again, take advantage of the capabilities you have there from an administrator perspective. What are your governance rules that you have to adhere to? If it requires a certain script or capability, you have this available. And again, future improvement, development, obviously, as we go forward, right, to support the movement. All right, so again, kind of building on that concept of maybe I need more, maybe I want to have a certain dashboard that does a certain thing that, again, I don't have natively. Dashboards are really cool to give us a visual context of what we're after. We can easily share that with our colleagues. And so there's a lot of different ways we can actually build against those using what we call the management connectors. Again, getting into that either API call or, again, leveraging some of the auditing capabilities. So let's take a look at what that would look like if we were looking at building custom dashboards here. All right. So I'm going to go back here and let's go into PowerApps now. And I have a couple, again, from the community development. Again, just to kind of talk about this conceptually here. I can actually use what we call the connector browser that actually will expose all of the API calls into my environment, where I can do all kinds of testing to kind of get my head around, okay, I want to leverage this particular API call for our dashboard, our management capabilities. And so here we created a Power App to kind of connect to that management connector and show you what that kind of looks like here. So now you can see on the left, we're enumerating all the operations that are available. And so you can actually start to test some of these out here. What is typical demo? Something always fails, right? Yep, so get admin environments here. If I click on this, yep, it's actually pulling in all of my environments that I was showing you earlier. And I can scroll down and start to build out, whatever admin connections I need to kind of report on or show there. If I need to disable flows, right? Let's say some flow or application is going rogue, consuming a lot of data issues or whatever the case may be. As an admin, I can be reported on that, and I can immediately call like a disable flow. Let's turn that off, right? Something has happened, something's going wrong, and so we need to put a gate on that and figure out what's going on, right? Remove all the admin activities can now be kind of browsed and connected and tested with, again, the connected browser here, right? Okay, so let's go back. And this one is, again, from the slide there showing you the ability to create your own kind of admin dashboard. Again, if you wanted to have specific slicers, something more tailored for your organization, your admin team there, you can create something like this. So you can see here I have my environments here on the left, and then I'm collecting the apps, how many connectors, how many flows for that particular environment. And as I click through here, I'll get more information here if this would work properly. But again, I can click through here and see my different flows and apps for my organization. My own custom tailored dashboard, that's really the goal we're trying to create there. I'm not sure why that's taking so long to come up. All right. Yeah, it looks like I got something going on my network or something's going on here. All right. Okay. So a couple of examples of customer scenarios, right? Yeah, maybe you want to, have a flow run automatically. When a flow comes into the organization, you want to put some automated governance controls around it, right? Maybe you want to create a script to do conditional access or whatever the case may be, right? You can do that very easily, right, from what we've kind of shown you here. If you need to, and this is the first one is kind of one of the more popular ones. Hey, I want to know when someone is sharing an app, with someone else. And so you can do that as well, right? So as we wrap up here, our best practices around alerting and action here, leverage those out-of-the-box admin portals. And there'll be lots of development going forward to get those into that common Power Platform portal there. And take a look at building your flows to be alerted on what's important for you and your organization, right? And again, help understand, communicate what policies you guys need to adhere to around your PowerApps and Flow development within your organization, right? And finally here, a couple of resources. There's a really good white paper that really includes all the stuff I was kind of talking about, goes into it a lot deeper, a lot more depth there. Go ahead and take a look at that as well. And again, the new analytics we showed you and everything else we talked about here as well, right? And this is, again, a new update from Ignite. We didn't have the Power Apps in the admin log, so we have those, and we kind of showed you that today. All right? That's really all I have. If there's any questions, feel free. Thank you for your time.